welcome to the show. I am your girl, Amara Negra, and you're listening to Exactly Amara, a production of iHeartRadio. Thank you so much for tuning in. As usual, yo sé que ustedes están harto de escucharme saying the same thing over and over again, but don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Rate us 5 stars and leave us the best ratings, the best reviews you can think of. I truly appreciate it. I always go in there and check it out. I, love to go to the YouTube channel, which, by the way, you can listen or watch the episodes from the past right there. And all you have to do is go to the search bar and write My Cultura podcast and click on Exactly Amara. I love to go in there and just read your comments on the show. How do you feel? If you like it or not. If you have any similar experiences, anything you would like me to talk about, all that good stuff. Because remember that Exactly Amara was made exactly for you. I always want to connect with the audience. I always want to connect to the people that are supporting me, that listen to the show. And that's why today, as usual, I always want to do topics that are meaningful, topics that connect to the audience, that connect to the people. Maybe you have been curious about how to invest your money. What are you supposed to do with it? What do you know about stocks? What do you know about a will? Do you have a will? What do you know about a trust? Have you seen this before? All these things, how much money do you really need to invest? How can you flip your money? How do you even organize your money? Do you need an accountant? Where do you get an accountant from? How much are you supposed to pay them? What's the percentage? I know there are endless questions when it comes to being financially educated. And unfortunately, la verdad hay que decirla, a lot of people in the Latino community were raised, coming from poverty. We were raised from immigrant parents that didn't have the opportunity to financially, to go to school, right? Or even around their household. They were never prepared to teach us about our finances, to teach us about, financial management. How are you supposed to handle it? How much are you supposed to, deduct? I know a lot of people that still to this day have never even done their taxes. There's just so much information lost, specifically in the Latino community. I feel that the Latinx community has somewhat grown, and we're the ones teaching our parents now, thanks to social media and the internet, that now we have more access into, well, if you don't know, you may not know because you don't want to know, because the information is definitely out there on Google. You can Google anything. But personally, I like to have a relationship with someone. I like to be able to talk to a real human being that if I have 1,000 questions, they can answer it for me and guide me towards the best direction. I know there's a lot of young people right now that are making money from e-commerce and all these things. They're investing it in cars, jewelry, all these great things. But I know that everybody has to live and go through their stages. Eso es normal. Todo el mundo tiene que vivir sus etapas. But you want to be smart enough to actually invest the money in something that later on is going to grow and is going to, the key word, assets. Well, before I keep going, because I could talk about this forever, because I'm very passionate about not going back to being poor ever again, not having to go back to, from where my mother started off. I think we won't. But even then, you never know too much, right? There's always space to learn, to grow, to educate yourself, surround yourself around people that know more than you. And that's why today I wanted to invite a very old friend of mine. We've been friends for years now. We recently reconnected, and I was like, Conchale, I would love to have you on my show because tú eres tan inteligente. You know so much. You also make me feel so proud as a well-educated Dominican man who has really been impactful in the Latino community, teaching so many Latinos about their finances and everything else. Anyways, long story short, I want to invite today Ivan Jimenez. Hi, my love. How are you?
How are you, Amara?
All is well. All is well. Contenta de tenerte aquí hoy. Super excited because everybody that knows me knows that I'm very passionate about money, how to invest it, what do we do, especially coming from a Latino household where a lot of people, don't talk about it. And I've even said that, when my girls grow up a little bit more and actually understand what money is, I want to start taxing them and teaching them to pay rent, even if it's 25 cents. But it's more about teaching them the logistics of this is the world that you live in.
Correct. So you're right. Look, we come from parents that obviously wanted to give us a much better lifestyle than they had. And one of the things that many times they did is they took the conversation of need and money off the plate. So we can have a childhood, so we can have an adolescence, so that we can live the American dream. That comes with a price. And the price is that that subject of money and the planning, when you're a first generation immigrant, is the first dream is sometimes to just get your documentation, get your house in order. But the notion of assets, long-term planning, investing for 5, 10, 30 years, when I started being a financial advisor and I was 22 and I was, at the top of the world in terms of financial advisory, but I was talking about planning for 30 years. It sounded like going to Mars. It was something like 20 years, 30 years, sounded so far away. As time goes by, you realize that 5 years go by, 10 years go by, 20 years go by. Whether or not you invest right, whether or not you have a will, they're going to happen. So I guess the conversation is that when you think about it, when it's front and center in your daily life, it becomes part of you. And then the beauty is the things that you do anyway become part of you. And I'll give you an example. Before the show started, producer and I were talking, and he was sharing with me about the purchase of his home, which, I literally wanted to do cartwheels because that's the first thing that anyone should do because you're going to pay rent anyway.
If you have money or you have a couple of dollars, enough to put it as a down payment for a property, you should invest it in your own property first where you live in, or should you get an investment property? For example, I have a friend of mine who was renting. He lives renting, but just bought an investment property. What makes more sense?
The concept is it doesn't matter, right? If he bought a house and it is now rented, he or she can move into that house in the event that renter leaves. The first and foremost is you should be, however, in the house that you live in, you should be as an anchor. If nothing else, you should live in your own home. There should be an attempt, a hardened attempt to purchase a property. Now, you mentioned something. Well, what if I can't afford where I am, right? Where this area, let's say, may not be amenable at this moment for me to buy. Well, buy anything, then you rent it, right? So anywhere, the first home doesn't have to be the last. So the first things first, I'm gonna basically take it home. There are so many things that allow someone to purchase a home. For example, if someone is a veteran, you have an exceptional amount of facilities.
Oh, no, for sure. There's a lot of people that get into the Army because of all the benefits that they receive. Besides the fact that,
correct.
Benefits, if you come out of there con la cabeza bien puesta, because hay gente que sale de ahí, mi amor, que you got to give them their credit when credit is due. Not everybody can take the pressure.
I know it very well. I was in the Army ROTC program in college, so I had friends who were officers that came out, and they were in the first war in Iraq, and one of them just wasn't altogether.
It's hard, but the benefits that you do receive are great, including being able to purchase properties in the U.S.
But right. Overall, the benefits outweigh, and furthermore, you do that to service the country. But going back to business, it's one way, because what are the hardships to getting a property? And the hardships are credit, savings, and down payment.
How
and
important is having good credit?
Monthly expense. So I'm going to go there. So that is probably something that doesn't cost any money. Let's say, to build good credit is non-costly. And to put it simply, if you don't have any credit, you should have open lines. You should have, una tarjetica, a little card here and there, 2 to 3, not 50, but 3 at least, open lines.
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt, but when you say credit cards, let's be clear, because, for example, I didn't have my first credit card till I was like 26, 27, and never used it till like el otro día. I'm really panicky because I saw my mom, having mad credit cards, getting herself in debt, una locura, financially not knowing how to administrate it. So I was always afraid of using credit cards. And I've always used my capital, which now I understand that you're not supposed to. You're supposed to use your credit cards and you pay it off, you build your credit, you get points, all these great things. What are some, just so that we know, what are some credit cards you advise a lot of people that are just starting off with?
So let's touch on the subject of credit cards. So on the matter of credit cards, what you want to do is use it instead of your debit card. You don't want to go to a gas station with your debit card. You don't want to pay your phone bill with your credit cards. You don't want to pay anything you give in public. You don't want to pay that with a debit. You want to do it with a credit card. However, you want to use it with, let's call it, manageable purchases, things that you're gonna that aren't permanent, right? Like a car, a house. You want to be able to pay them off at the end of the month, or at least keep what's called the usage, the amount of credit available versus the amount of credit that you use. Keep it below 30%. And the goal is not to rack up the usage on the credit card. You only do that in an emergency. Don't go on a vacation, because you have money in the credit card. You don't have money in the credit card. The credit card is an available usage. It doesn't mean it's money you have. The interest rates on these things are at 20, 30%. So that means that amount doubles. At 20%, it doubles every 3.5 years. It doubles. So 3 becomes 6 becomes 12. That's why people, get into mad, as you would say, mad problems with credit cards, because no one says how to use it. They just send it to you.
Yeah.
Right? No one has
Correct.
this conversation. But the conversation is, use it as a cash card where you have that money.
There you go. Tip number 1. Get at least 3 lines of credit, right, with your credit card. Keep it below 30%. And
correct.
Instead of using your debit card, use your credit card to pay your gas station, food, this, whatever it is. Just keep your debit card at home. But that's what I would do, because if I have it, for some reason, I feel like I'm going to use it. Or just put it away. Use your credit card, pay it off little by little every month. It builds up your credit. And then little by little, it doubles whatever amount it is that you currently have in that card. It will double up eventually if you pay on time. So that's our first tip. Going back to investing, the first investment, thing overall that you should do if you have enough money to put as a deposit, whether it is based off of what Ivan said, it doesn't matter if it's an investment property or the property that you live in, right? As long as you have purchased a property. Okay.
Correct. And what that does is you're building wealth with time, right? And it's called leverage wealth. It's money. So you're borrowing, let's say $200,000 that you don't have in cash today. And even if you did have them, you borrow the 200,000, 300,000, and guess what? The increase in price is off of that number. So using math when we were in school, 3% of 300,000 is 9,000, which means that if that house appreciates every year by 2%, it goes up $6,000. By 3%, it goes up $9,000. If it goes up 4% and it's a $300,000, it increases in price by $12,000 a year. So check that out. While you're sleeping, you're making $1,000 a month on somebody else's money. However, there's something I want to share. There are 2 types of way to make money. There's cash, which is what the world, we've lived in pretty much all our life. And then there's accrual, where you're building assets. Okay. So think of it as I take it to agronomy. So let's think of a cow. You would have one which grows to increase in weight, and then you sell it by the pound. And then you have the others that get milk every day. Then you have the combination. So what I'm saying is, one is cash, one generates cash daily, and the other one grows with time. And you always want to be in a scenario where your cash covers your expenses and then some, but you always want to accrue so that your money is growing.
Basically, you guys are tan harto to hear me talking about generational wealth This is a perfect way to create generational wealth, continuing to add assets to your portfolio. That's how I see it. We would have more generational wealth among the Latinx community. But the only way to do that is to get yourself educated on how to financially invest your money. And if you don't know what to do, you find experts like Ivan that can guide you. Listen, what do you I don't know, you were on e-commerce or you've been selling, doing washing cars, whatever it is that you've been making, hustling your money. You saved up $100,000, $80,000, even $50,000. You don't even know how you can flip this money, and this can become your first assets. Sometimes you don't need as much money as people think, because even a small, cute apartment is not necessarily in the best neighborhood or whatever, can actually bring you, some type of income, whether you decide to put it on Section 8, whether you decide to put it on Airbnb, whether you decide, whatever it is, there's a lot of different systems and things that you can do. Something else I want to talk about, because I've heard this before, but I would want you to clarify it. I was told by, my mom and, the older Latino community, oh, I paid off my house. My house is paid. I don't have no problems. The American dream. Then I was told, no, do not pay your house off, by no means necessary, because you can actually leverage off the property that you have. Can you explain that to me?
Right. So there are two different mindsets. There's a mindset of in the Latino community where the house is an important anchor for that household. And particularly when it's first generation immigrants, they come and, they've gone through so many struggles. They want to make sure that they have a home, that they secure that for their children and grandchildren. So that's a natural event. What I recommend is that you build revenue sources, income sources, okay, means of getting cash flow, and that the payment on the house where you reside should not be, let's call it, significant relative to your income. So I'm going to give you an example. If you have a house, let's just use a round number. Your house is going to be worth $1 million. Whether it's today, tomorrow, next year, 5, 10 years, everyone is going to listen to you from here on in is going to be the Millionaires Club. You are going to create more millionaires, Amara, than Home Depot and
Lord,
Walmart.
preach, because starting through exactly, Amara.
Exactly. Because you are giving voice to, and you're giving a light to an area of our economy that heretofore has not gotten it that much. Latina, Afro-descendant female, and just aspiring young Latinx and even Americans, just plain loving people who love America. That's what this program is about. The notion is people need to aspire. And it doesn't mean you have to do it as a first round, right? So you nailed it. There are multiple homes all over the country that aren't 200, 500, 6,000, $7 million homes. No, you have the 50s. And guess what? With 50s, you could buy a 50s, you could buy a 200s with like literally what it costs you to braid your hair.
That's
for a year.
another thing too, that when we think about buying a property, by the way, this is not just real estate. We're talking about finances overall today, but I thought that, that's an important thing. You should start up where you live should be, one of your main goals. But when you think about these numbers, this house costs $500,000, $400,000, $300,000, whatever it may be, remember that you're not paying all of this off the rip. All you need is a deposit, a 20%, 30%. And to be honest, it depends. Every state has their own programs in which, you may qualify for a program that you only have to put 5%, 1%. I mean, you just never know. 3%.
3, some are none. Like I said, if the renters have to put anything. And there are areas that there are incentives to, let's call it, populate those areas. So someone who can work remotely and, they basically pay their dues for 2 or 3 years. They go and they live off the, let's call it, the main grid, and they go to a rural area. Guess what? They have a house. They now have an asset. They're building wealth. The point is, no matter how you slice it or dice it, put that as a goal, as a marker, and put as a marker a number. You don't get on a train and for those that live in and say, all right, I'm just getting on this train, and then, okay, so where are you going? What's your stop? you need to stop. You need to have a marker. You need to have a place where you want to land on. And that's critically important because every single successful entrepreneur in the world has a vision of what they want. It may not be exactly where they land.
You work towards
Many
it.
times you work towards it. And sometimes you work towards it and something else happens, but you guess what? It's a pivot, but it doesn't matter.
So here goes another tip. Mira, mi gente, write this down. Pay attention. This episode is very important. This is a very educational episode. So the other tip that Ivan is giving us is focusing on our goal. What is our financial goal? What is it you're trying to establish? What are your dreams and aspirations? Financially, what numbers should you be reaching? If your bills are about, I don't know, $5,000 a month, obviously you want to work towards, okay, well, how can I get 8,000? 8,000 would be my perfect number just so that you can have a little extra cash for a rainy day. Or even if you want to invest some of that money. So we all went through the pandemic. We saw how it felt when everything shut down. God forbid, let's pray that never happens again. But y si pasa, are you prepared? I think that was our biggest lesson, is to prepare ourselves because we never know what can happen. Now, something that also is important to me is for those that haven't thought about it, because we feel like we're going to live forever. And we've seen these things happen over and over again. And for the most part, this happens in more of the, those that are more like millionaires or financially allá arriba, the other category of the people in this world. The wills and the trust and all these things. Let's just say that you purchase this house. You purchase this beautiful home. You have a car. You have a business. You have, I don't know, money in your bank. You have all these other great things. God forbid you financially, are well off, but you forgot to do your will. You forgot to put all your assets under a trust. Or maybe you put it under your name and you just got a lawsuit. They just sued you. Now let's talk about protecting your assets, protecting, your investments. What should you do? How should you go about it? And why is it important?
Excellent point. So number one, everyone can have a retirement account. You can have an IRA, a Roth IRA. You can have multiple, be it through work, 401k, 503b, whatever. Retirement accounts, they cannot be, you cannot encroach through a lawsuit. So that's number one. Number two, annuities are also a source of a way to protect. But more importantly, that's like it's an instrument that's like wrapped with an insurance, and that's a source. But to make it simple, everyone listening to you, Amara, should have a will. Every single person should have a will. And it doesn't matter about assets. It matters about simple things like, what if you get sick and you're in the hospital for 3 months, 6 months, a year? What do you want your family to do? Do you want them to basically cut it at 3 months or 6 months, or you want to just to live, pray for you forever? That's a decision you need to make. If you have children and you're a single mom or you're a single dad, or you're in multiple, marriage that's intertwined with multiple children or you need to literally, this is something where you have to have a will, like today, or at least a letter of wishes. I wish my son to be cared for by, my daughter to be cared for by, in my absence or in my disability. Who, in the event that you have either a disability or an absence, a final absence, who do you want to care for?
Which, by the way, in many occasions, we're like, no, the kids automatically go to the mother. Mira, you never know, or the father, you never know what's going on. Because, God forbid, we could do a family trip. It's happened in many occasions. Both parents are gone. Now you don't have, A or B. What happens to your kids? Do they go to the system? Do they go to the grandparents? Maybe they don't go to the grandparents. Why? Because you didn't do a will where you specified.
Right. So it is of great weight. It is of great weight in the legal system for, they call it the hand out of the grave, where the person basically is like handing you the note saying, hey, this is what I want to happen. So you don't want to leave that in the hands of a third person or a judge or the system, or for there to be a dispute between two uncles or two parents, or for that to be a cause of aggravation. Or guess what? It could be that relative that everybody knows you don't want to leave your kids with. So what I'm saying is it's critically important that something that doesn't cost money, like a will. Number two, that is a must. It's called term life insurance. Term, TERM, life insurance. Anybody who's a parent of a child should have term life insurance to cover their income for that child. So it should be enough money for them to live between now and the time they're 18, tack on 4 years of college, and maybe another 1 or 2 years of experience. So whatever you take out as term life should cover that amount of money so that they are not a burden wherever they live. Because you know what happens, Amara? When a child is in somebody's home, the first day there too is one thing. But it's another thing when that child has now a resource to sustain themselves, to be able to go to that school, that the private school that the parents may have wanted them, or the tutoring, or whatever other resource that could be available to them. But because what term life does, it only insures you in the event of a final event, in the event of death. You're not insuring, it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. It's not expensive relative to the other insurances. So let's say with $50, $30, $100, whatever a month, or even at work, everyone who works for a major corporation, they always have insurance and they offer you the opportunity. Most of us don't even, we just want to, but they offer the opportunity to multiply your annual income times 1, times 2, times 3, and for nothing, for like 3, 5, 10, 20, $30 more. So what I'm saying is, if nothing else out of this, term life, everybody who has young children. And by the way, everything I'm sharing with you are things I did, right? In other words, I made sure that when my children were little, let's call it, that while they got to the age of 18, I had insurance from for term life all that time.
See, this is what I'm saying.
That's
Nobody teaches
1.
us these things, so we don't know what to do. Really quick on the will. What exactly does a will cover? Because for the most part, we think about the financial part, but you hit on some points that are very important. It's not just finances; it's even making health decisions. Right. So what should you have in there?
So you want to cover, let's say the last event. How do you want your burial? Do you want to be incinerated? Do you want your ashes to be spread over a particular park or school?
I want to be buried in my backyard.
Location, the river. You want to be buried in your backyard? Exactly. Whatever it is that you wish to do, so let's cover the events, like the last ceremony. Who you want or don't want to attend it.
You can
by
put
the
that?
way.
Wow, that's shady. Oh no, in the will it says you can't come.
No, meaning you're basically uninviting to be a speaker in your final ceremony. Excellent. Make sure, you saw it there was a politician where they made sure that one of the politicians didn't get invited, so we saw it on a national stage. But it's sometimes it's to avoid conflict. Sometimes it's so that, you had, there's so many intricacies, but that's individualized to the person. So you have the first asset, obviously, is home and personal belongings. You may have mementos that are of value that you want to transmit to your children.
Mi ropa fa fulanita, you spread out, what do you want, this and that. Okay, perfect.
Right. So personal belongings and jewelry. You may have jewelry that may have passed down multi-generationally from abuelita, the tatarabuelita. So you want to make sure that personal belongings are addressed. So you have burial, personal belongings, money. How do you want those assets to be distributed? If you have a retirement account at work, like a 401k, IRA, whatever, and you have not assigned a beneficiary, that's something.
And also, if you have a little, bootleg extra bank account for your savings that you don't want nobody else to know about, make sure that somebody knows about it. Have that in your will, because then that can get lost in the midst of that. I mean, there's so many topics to cover here.
That
and I
can
know
get
that we
lost.
Kind of have to wrap a little bit, but go through them.
Yes. Yeah. So you have we're down to assets. So anything that you own of value, you want to have there. And then obviously, if you own other assets, you want to basically direct them into trusts or into the bequeath, into who
Oh
you're
my
going to
God, we never
give
even
them
got to
to.
talk about the trust. Well, just tell me briefly, what is a trust and why is it important for us to have it?
A trust is a call it like an envelope where you put assets in and it's protected. So it's a judicially, it's under justice, it's like its own person. So a trust, but guess what? A trust doesn't drive. A trust doesn't get into
So if
arguments. A
they sue
trust
you,
doesn't
oh,
get into
Ivan, I'm going to sue you, but all your properties and all your money and everything is under a trust, what happens?
in the United States, it's a little harder. They still have ways, in some jurisdictions. But even within trusts, there are things, there are Florida land trusts. Check this out. There's a concept called the Florida land trust where you don't have to, in the trust document, only the beneficiary knows it's their trust, but it doesn't say, Maria de Los Angeles Irrevocable Trust. No, it says Landmark Blue Revocable Trust. Who the beneficiary is only known to the beneficiary. So the person that appears is a trustee. The trustee gets, so it's a way to make it harder because
So it's the
harder to
best way
find.
to protect all your assets, your finances, is the best way to just protect all those things from any lawsuits
It's
or
it's
one way,
way.
one
It's
of
one way.
many. With the rise of new financial technology, how can people stay safe while exploring their new, new opportunities? Because obviously now everything is digital, everything is just a tap away. What are some of the ways that you think that we can protect ourselves from getting scammed?
That's of value, right? So you want to crawl, walk, run when it comes to money, right? You don't want to go into this quick scheme. If it's simple logic, if it's too good to be true, it is. Okay. If you can't explain it with a crayon, don't do it. If you can't explain it to a 4-year-old, don't do it. That's simple. Number 3 is make sure the person, gets learned. Learn about something that's mission critical. I mean, you learned about triangles in school and parallelograms. What was the last time you used a parallelogram? Okay, but they haven't taught you about things like how to avoid scam. And guess what? Scams are constant. That even to pros. We in the financial services, and we get bombarded with people that are constantly trying. So the answer to your question is that is something of utter importance. So one thing I recommend is starting out with companies or firms that are established, that have, in the case of securities, there's an insurance that, like, it's called Securities and Investors Protection Corp. It's the equivalent of the FDIC. Okay. But start with things that are tangible that you know. So, for example, if you're going to buy stock, right, start with things that you know first and understand that you got to give this time. Don't try to make a buck in a year or 3 months. Give it time. But things that if you know I'm going to give you an example. Coca-Cola, Pizza Hut, if you see this new product, Chick-fil-A, or a new franchise that may have been public, those are good ways for you to know. There's a
Don't
book
do
that I
things that are
recommend
like
to
small
everybody.
companies that no one knows about. But then what
They're
about the Ubers?
not
What
in
about the big
not
companies?
you could, right? You could. There's a way to slice it. You could, but only with 5% of your money. In other words, 5% of your money, speculate. If you lose it, you lost it. 5%. But the answer, the Uber is a publicly traded company. It's a company that we all know, it's ubiquitous. But again, my suggestion is that you first learn about what is it that makes these things tick. And there's a book. It's an old book, but it's a really good book that I always recommend. It's by a guy by the name of Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch, and it's the book is called One Up on Wall Street. And that book explains in like simple English literally the professional paradigms, the columns that we use to make investment decisions. It's called One Up on Wall Street. Very good book, easy to read. It's an older book, but guess what? You get it free in the library. I recommend everybody to try to either download or get it in the library. But that book is a absolutely good book to read. You know, of all the books that are out there, that's one that I simply recommend as the first book that everybody should read.
Bueno, guys, you already heard it exactly from Ivan. He gave us some amazing tips. I could talk to him forever because I have so many questions about still what to do with my money. How do I go about it? All these great things. By the way, if we wanted to get in touch with you, if we wanted to ask more questions, if we wanted to work with you directly on any of these things, how can we get in touch with you? Where can we follow you? Where can we see you?
I always reverted back to the source. Whenever I'm in a medium, I say, hey, contact Amara.
Okay.
Contact her.
I need my commission.
You know, contact Amara. Contact Amara because at the end of the day, you know, I think you've done a tremendous job. There are simple tips for everybody. Open an account for your children and have them deposit that account. Before I forget, and number 2, instead of when you have these little birthdays, open an educational account and tell your family, don't buy them the sock and the camiseta that they don't use. Just put $5, $10 in the educational account. And that way, that conversation continues.
That is fire. Just sell them.
That's it.
I love that.
A hack.
By the way, Ivan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Always.
I've learned so much. I hope that you guys have learned as well. I'm definitely going to be posting this on my Instagram account as well so that you guys can check it out. Tell a friend to check out exactly Amara, this episode specifically, so you can learn a few things, okay? Thank you so much for being part of Exactly Amara. Make sure to find me on YouTube. Catch my show by searching for My Cultura Podcast on YouTube and clicking on Exactly Amara. Follow me, obviously, on Instagram at Amara La Negra, ALN, Amara La Negra, ALN. And remember, this has been a production of iHeart's My Cultura Podcast Network. For more podcasts from iHeart, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite show. You just heard Exactly Amara.